I'm Deanna Ritchie. I've been a product designer for 9 years at Tulip Retail. We do iOS apps for luxury retailer, building relationships between associates and customers. I've worked at Manulife on the mobile team, rebuilt the group benefits app, and then some work on banking app and the group retirement app. The approach hasn't been different. Outdated system, wonky back end, not a great business management. I'm really good at building information architecture, figuring out all the flows, buttons, UI details, putting that all on top of it. I have watched so many WWDC videos. They show patterns. This is why they're not that good. And then reframe and restructure it. That's been my go-to resource. Our app works in over 40 languages. It is a global audience. Each brand will have its own configurations. Client book, store book, all customers. If I don't write it down, it's not staying in my brain. The more senior you get, the more you're doing documentation, working in spreadsheets, not in Figma.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Design Hack Podcast. Today we have another wonderful guest, Diana, with us. She has worked across various organizations, various platforms, and various industries. Currently, she is a staff product designer at Tulip, and she has worked across various other organizations like Manulife, Canadian Tire. Let's get her on stage and talk about more of her journey and the insights that we can get and we can learn from. Hey Diana, how are you doing?
Hi, Abe. Good. How are you?
I am pretty good. Let's kind of start with a bit of an introduction for the audience out there.
Sure. I'm Deanna Ritchie. I've been a product designer for about 9 years. Most at the moment, I'm at Tulip Retail, and we do iOS apps for some pretty like niche things, all around luxury retailer and like what's the word I want? Building relationships between associates and customers.
That is really interesting. Let's kind of kickstart with a question that you have worked on apps that have created like large, like millions of user impact, and from banking to insurance to luxury retail, as you talked about. Can you kind of walk us through how your design approach kind of shifts based on the industry that you're designing for?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, background there, I've worked at Manulife before as a product designer on the mobile team, and we built, or I guess rebuilt the group benefits app, and then I had done some work on the banking app and the group retirement app as well. Honestly, the approach, funny enough, hasn't been that different because I think both at Manulife and Tulip, some of the problems we've had is that we've got an outdated system with a bit of a wonky back end and not a great like business side management. So what I think I'm really good at, if I took my own horn, is basically building the information architecture around everything, figuring out all the flows and everything that needs to go into stuff, and then doing the smaller elements like the buttons, the smaller UI details, and putting that all on top of it. So funny enough, between both Manulife and Tulip, that has been very, very similar. Of like, okay, like let's deconstruct this. What is it? What are we trying to do? And then figure out a new flow, a new information architecture, and go from there.
That is really interesting. How do you tell that somebody who is kind of new in the design industry can learn more around information architecture and how that can they can kind of embed that in their design process specifically?
Yeah, it's for me, I've learned it by doing. Like, been very happy with having the opportunity to like start from new, basically, from all these older systems that existed. Um, as far as learning, there is a fair bit of stuff from Apple. So they've got these WWDC videos, and I have watched so many of them. And then I'll find ones where they talk about like app structure and things like this, and I'll go back into them over and over and over again. I know they've got some really good stuff around basically navigation and the structure of apps as a whole. So they kind of show you, hey, here's some like patterns that you might see. This is why they're not that good. And then they'll reframe and restructure it. So that's been one of my go-to resources. Other than that, there's like Medium articles and things out there. If you just kind of Google information architecture, um, if you sift through all the dev stuff, sometimes you can find some really nice design ones. I think the dev ones they're good to know the concepts from. So like I've looked at those from time to time, but a lot of the stuff, you know, I don't like coding. I always want to like rip my hair out anytime I try it. So it's good to know the structure of what goes into it because I think you take that and you apply the structure in both design and dev. But then the actual design side is like, okay, like your output is like mock-ups and wireframes and all these things for code.
No, that is interesting. And I think I know a lot of time we kind of, as designers, we roll back from kind of going into that coding aspect. But one thing I specifically have learned because I have a coding background is that whenever I learned like information architecture or like design system from a developer's lens, or the kind of developer's document, which are very difficult to read at points, but they definitely give like a perspective of what developers would want to know from us to make their life easier as well. And I think that really helps to eventually make the product much better as well. So
Exactly. Yeah. Like it helps you speak the same language between the design and dev. Because even if you say information architecture to developers, sometimes they think more like system architecture. You have to be like, hold on, like that's not quite what I meant. I even had today, um, I had said system font, and I'm thinking of the system font as in like the whole suite of fonts, like body one, title, large head, large subhead, like that, Apple or a design system has. And then my devs were thinking of system font as in the literal font family. I'm like, hold on, we're speaking a different language at the moment. Let's roll that back. So yeah, that's such a good point. It's really learning the other side of the coin and how like the people actually building these products are thinking about them and absorbing a lot of those techniques, which
true, and a lot of
it's hard to do, like and it's something I think you need to be doing on the regular to grow your muscle for it, especially if
fully
you
true.
don't.
Makes sense. And I think this sometimes also feels like you are actually putting yourself in the user shoe, and user here being the developer, PM, whatever, and trying to understand how they would want to look at things. Which again, with the if you don't have that expert knowledge, it becomes a little difficult. But again, this is a design problem that you would want to solve a lot of
Yeah.
times. But that is interesting. Okay, so let's go forward with your current role and where you are at Tulip. You're kind of leading design for the clientele experience for brands like Chanel, Dolce and Gabbana, and much, much more. What are some of the unique UX challenges when designing kind of tools for these high end kind of fashion associates?
Yeah. There's a couple. There's some that I think are just like our app works in I think over 40 languages and things. Like that's not unique to fashion, but it is a very, you know, global audience that we cater to. Obviously, there's lots of other companies that do that too. One of the more interesting parts of my day to day is actually interacting with the business people of those brands. Some of them are fantastic. They're all fantastic, let's be honest, but like they can be extremely demanding. So you're almost doing a little bit of a consulting role there because they expect the best, right? They have the best products, they offer their customers the best experiences. They want the best for their sales associates to be working on too. So there's a lot of balancing their expectations and like the product and hey, like we offer a product to everybody. We can't have all these little specific details for you. So sometimes brands will want everything customized to them because like that's how everything else is. So there's a bit of figuring out the relationship and figuring out like, hey, like, okay, let's have something that works for you, but it might not be exactly what you wanted. So that stakeholder management. And then on top of that, I was gonna say scale too, but again, scale's again something that lots of brands and companies deal with. Our scale and all of our products, I think one of the more interesting like things that we need to be aware of is that we are providing apps for the sales associates, but then we've also got this whole business user, like who's getting the information of like the data, the analytics, how well their sales associates are using the app. So there's usually a whole like you design the app experience, but then you need to also figure out this business user experience where they need to get all the information that's being generated from the app. So a bit broader in that context. Because sometimes I do find myself just, you fall into the app experience and then I'm like, oh yeah, the business users want this and this and this. So, okay, we got to figure that out too.
That is really interesting. I If I would be thinking, like obviously you're design clienting, but I was also thinking in terms of when these high end fashion brands kind of have their, like this is premium, this is like elite premium, like it's not like for a general audience out there, it's like elite. How do they kind of cater to these people in terms of digital experiences? Again, they, I don't know how would that differ for them, like how do they make that differentiation which they have brought in the real life with their clothing brand, which again a different concept on its own. Any kind of insights that you have around this space, maybe?
There's a lot of like each brand will have its own metrics and like even like systems that we plug into. So when we're doing our UI, we always need to have multiple configurations in mind. So like for example, we have three ways of displaying customers. We've got like the client book, which is just the store associates, the sales associate, excuse me. We've got the store book, which is like all the customers in the store. And then we have an all customers where it's a global, we're getting all the data from their customer management tools. Different retailers will have different setups of how these three books interact. So then when I'm designing an architecture and like a UI for it, I need to figure out number one, we have all of the configs documented. Um, there's, the all customers in store book only store book, and client book. And then there's also a couple like if it's client book, store book equals sum of all client books. So like what is the store book in a lot of cases, we're figuring out what that config is. So it could be accumulation of people, could be completely different. So it's a lot of like the UI we're doing needs to work for all of these scenarios, which isn't straightforward. I'd love it if it were, it'd be easier, but it's usually, you need to figure out scenario A, B, C, D, E, and then make sure you're also surfacing the customer data that needs to be there. Client data.
Very
Sorry,
interesting.
interchangeably sometimes, and that might be
That's fine.
confusing for people.
That's fine. That sounds like it gets quite messy with all those configurations and everything. How do you kind of keep up to that? Like it becomes challenging, complex as you kind of build more and more and more and more. How do you kind of keep up to that? And obviously you are at a space where you're looking at a bigger picture, not at a specific thing as well. So how do you kind of keep your logic things in your mind, and how do you kind of handle that mess?
Documentation, because if I don't write it down, it's not staying in my brain. I feel like that's something that the more senior you get as a designer, the more you're doing documentation and you're working in spreadsheets. You're not in Figma. You're doing the less glamorous side of things. A lot of the information too, like you'll find it's probably just living in different people in the organization, especially in a smaller company, you haven't documented everything. So a lot of the work is writing stuff down. I'd say AI has been very helpful with that too, because I can just, brain throw stuff into Gemini or ChatGPT, not like detailed specs, obviously, because we don't want them to have that. But we have an instance of Gemini at Tulip, and we'll just throw stuff in there and then kind of get like, oh yeah, like that's what I'm trying to say. Like we'll just put that in now in our documentation.
That sounds amazing, and that is a great use of AI, because I feel a lot of times we may take more time to figure out how what exactly we want to convey, but AI is gonna get it right away, or maybe in a 2 or 3 stands. Like I have started using, I have done that for a lot of my work, and I have made it much more easy because I was typing a lot, like a lot, when I was kind of actually inputting this to ChatGPT or any other thing. Like I bought another AI product called Whisperflow, and it's just like you click a function key, you just speak, it types, and if you want to type it on an email, you just click, you say, "Hey Flo, type this email." It will write the whole email. I don't even have to go to. It's pretty good.
That's amazing. What was it called
Yeah.
again?
Whisperflow. I'll send you. Don't worry. I have a
Okay.
discount code as well. Don't worry. Yeah, yeah. It's pretty good. Like it was from a friend of mine who I actually hosted on the podcast as well. He's a founding product designer, and he works at the same company. It's a very amazing product. Like I feel really great with what they are doing. I'm looking forward to when it comes to mobile, because I feel even in mobile to type this much it gets tough. So If it comes,
That's a problem we have with store associates because we've got a whole note feature, but then to
Mhm.
actually get them to type it, they're in the store, they're doing lots of things. People are walking in the door, so to just capture that in that moment of like, hey, like I had an appointment with this person. She tried on the red dress and the blue dress. She really liked the red one, but she's gonna go somewhere else and come back later. That would be awesome.
That would be actually awesome. I think that's something you guys can definitely integrate. Okay, so let's go forward. So obviously you have been designing for enterprise tools used in stores, and it's is very different than obviously from B2C or customer consumer apps. What are some insights you have learned about building these experiences for store associates across like a bigger domain of like 40 plus countries?
Ooh. Um, on the side of not being B2C, it's funny, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't need to worry about, as bad as it sounds. Like all the app store marketing pages, like I look at ours and I always cringe. I'm like, these aren't good. But the people we're selling to, all the business people, they're not looking at this at all. So it kind of just shows up on the sales associates' devices through their whatever they're using to manage their tech. But for actually doing the sales associate side, I don't. This isn't a good answer. Like this is not a good design take, but we can cut corners from time to time because we are able to rely on the retailer's ability to train their associates. So a lot of the times the retailers will host training sessions and they'll host like, hey, like these are some changes that are coming to the app because Tulip demoed them to us and we really liked them, so we're going to adopt them. So it's a terrible answer because like I would love to have onboarding and like, hey, like new features and walk through instructions in the app. But being B2B, it's not something that we need to rely on as much as it is for B2C because there's a big incentive for the associates to use our app. So we really need to dive into that incentive. And the incentive is obviously when they make sales, they make their own commission in most of the cases. Not all of the retailers, but like quite a few. So they are pretty incentivized to use it. And we just need to make sure that we're providing the right things at the right time. Um, basically as well. Now I've lost my train of thought, but got so hung up on, hey, we're doing these things really badly, but it is a totally different like B2B, B2C world. So yeah.
No, that is interesting because I have seen this as well that B2B is more about is not about the most beautiful thing. It's more about the most usable thing. Because again, even if it's beautiful, people are not gonna care. But with B2C, if it's beautiful, and if it's maybe less useful, it has to be useful at a certain level. But if it's less useful, people will still download it and appreciate it because of its beauty. And there are like I know a bunch of these examples. Like I know a company back in India whose brand is like so on point. Like you feel that premiumness. But if you
Mhm.
really see their app, it's in UX, it's not the best. It does the job, but it's not the best. But like they are the top of the top, if you say so, at this point, even at design. But again, it is very interesting to see how this spaces kind of evolve in both the
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I think we're like myself, I'm always striving for like the Apple level of perfection. But then there's the reality of like, timelines and budget and team resources. Like we're not an Apple company. So being a perfectionist, you have to swallow a lot of that. You're like, okay, like I wish we were doing all these amazing things that you see in the Apple ecosystem or you see other places. I'm like, but we're not quite there yet. We'll just do 20% better is still 20% better. Like it doesn't need to be 80 every time. So that the small incremental improvements to make sure that the users are getting what they want out of it, that I guess can be said for anything. But I think you've got a lot more grace with your users in this case where they're like willing to overlook a lot of things.
Very interesting take on the B2B space, and I think that is interesting in its own ways, on how do we want to do it. Okay, so let's go forward. So you're also building Tulip's design system. How do you kind of approach creating obviously this big scalable system that stays flexible enough to kind of serve multiple product teams while staying the consistency it needs to be.
Yeah, it's tricky. I'll say that much. I don't have like, oh, if you use this hack, it'll be amazing. It's a lot of communication between dev teams, between other designers. It's a lot of even trying to just socialize what you're doing. Like one of our last dev all hands, I shared basically like, hey, like this is how designers like to think about colors. Like we're thinking about them in tokens. And that's probably not unfamiliar to most devs. But at Tulip, we just operate in light mode right now. And I'm like, hey, like if you think about color like this and tokens, we can start to think about, hey, like, what would this look like in dark mode? What would this look like in a whole bunch of different variations? So much of the design system work is like socializing the design system, getting feedback. And at someday, I'd love to get to the point where we've got like a governance layer, but I feel we're not quite there yet. But like, we're not a very mature design system would have that, where you've got all these, I don't say laws, but like basically ways of working, where we haven't had the time and the bandwidth to establish that. We're more focused on at the moment of getting the system modernized, number one, because we had some old stuff that we needed to clean up. Um, and then consistent places too. Again, because of the old stuff.
Very interesting, and I think I agree. A lot of like I've learned this from my earlier managers that because they worked at teams which were really quite large and they had to manage these things, and they had that similar governance model, but they were like anything that change has to come up, it has to be a request, and everything has to have approval by someone or some like too many, like depends on the organization on how does that go. And I've seen also that at big techs as well. Like I've talked to a lot of people who worked at Meta or anything, like you can't see something that is out of place because there are too many governance levels like across these things. So that is what I think, and that is not something that's going to come up to a startups or anything that is young. Like there has to be there will be a certain place, like a lot of people would want that, but that's something I don't think the company even needs right now. I think you eventually it comes up to that.
Yeah, it's like the evangelized final state, but at a 200 person company, it's never going to get there. That's when you're like 1,000 people basically, and you've got a 200 person design team.
True, and then when you have like design teams specifically for one specific feature, then it would make sense because then you are at that level that there are layers in between, and then you can bring that governance model as well, which makes sense to me as well as you
The
say.
thing I would love with the governance model though is this is something I'm trying to get in to our design system, but the accessibility side of things, and then the like doing things in right to left languages, because that's something Apple does so well, and I've watched so many of their videos about it, and I'm just like, oh, like we could do this. It's going to take effort, but we could basically figure out how our interface should work in Arabic and Hebrew and any other right to left language, where you can then serve a whole different audience in their own language, which would be fantastic.
Very interesting take on how what you said. Okay, so let's go forward. So you have redesigned a lot of projects and you've redesigned Manulife's kind of group benefits and retirement apps and kind of dramatically improved the app ratings as well. What were some of the key decisions or changes that made that big impact on user satisfaction?
Okay, super interesting, because there's one thing we did where we actually got the app ratings. Um, the old Manulife app was really awful. Justifiably, it had really bad app ratings. We had done so many usability improvements, basically rewrote the whole thing. But the moment, the difference between getting good reviews and not getting reviews was actually building in the mechanism to prompt for reviews. So we done so many usability improvements, but the getting the 4 stars and everything, obviously the usability improvements need to come first. It was setting up that in-app mechanism where it's like, rate this app, or how are you enjoying Manulife group benefits? And then when we actually put that in, that's when they came flooding in. But before that, we could have made all the improvements and no one's going to say, oh, this is such an amazing experience. Let me go to the app store on my own accord and rate the app. Like, go find it, search. But if it's just in the app right there, like, oh yeah, 4 stars, great. That was the huge difference, which was so interesting. Obviously, it hinged on making the experience good first, but it was crazy. And I think for insurance apps, no one's got a high expectation,
No, I
right?
agree, and I think in this what you just said, I do have a lot of debates on a lot of people in terms of what should be intuitive and what should be nudged to people. Because if you say this, people will be like, you are forcing people to do this. But I feel a lot of times, if they don't see, they don't know. and
100%.
and this is something business wanted, not a user will never want to like put a separate piece of time to do that. But if they really love the experience, user, like it's similar to restaurant experiences. You love the experience, you will tip more, right?
Yeah.
You will put that extra effort to be like, it was really nice, telling the waitress, telling the chef, like it was really amazing. But if you are in the app, if you kind of relate that here, you need to give them a way to do that, right?
You mean to make it easy. Yeah, one of our big learnings from just doing a whole bunch of like group benefits related research is, people have important things to do in their life. They need to focus on getting healthy. They have their families. They don't want to spend time submitting a claim. Like, no one wants to do that. So it's already an inconvenience. So then to actually make that a good experience and then basically delight them with the fact that it's not a bad experience. I sound like I'm making bad products all the time, but it's such an interesting thing where, if the experience already sucks and you prompt them, you're gonna have 1 star across the board. But if it's good or just, like, better than expected and you prompt them, most people will just like, "Yeah, 3, 4 stars, easy peasy."
No, I
One
fully agree.
There's an
Go ahead.
interesting business case. So at Manulife, our main competitor was Sun Life. Both of them are in like the Waterloo region, funny enough. But Sun Life's had a really good app rating, and then ours, before we had redone the app, was really, really bad, and our business teams were actually losing sales because of it. So then all of a sudden there was this need to improve the app, which is funny because, we would have loved to do it from day one, but we needed that like external push for it. And then we could say, "Oh,
That
look, our rating's the same now, so you should be able to sell this really well."
very interesting. And I think I totally agree. A lot of these, I was reading somewhere. Oh, yes, I remember. So I was reading at, there's a book called Pattern Breakers. I totally forgot the author, but released in 2024. And he's talking about how these different inflections make or like makes new startups. So for example, for Airbnb, it gave an example of, and which makes sense here as well, that in earlier times, the ways to trust something was word of mouth more, or like other people's experiences. But as social media like Facebook came in, the trust factor, the trust appetite became like increased. Like you can trust a stranger on internet to talk, and kind of you can build that trust. And then came the marketplace rating systems with Amazon and other things, which made you trust, which made your trust factor on like a number online or somewhere that you see or as well. So the Airbnb, that's how the Airbnb kind of model came in, from that inflection that people were able to trust strangers to be at their house or to host people at their house. So what you said is relate backs to there, like people nowadays make a lot of decisions based on a lot of things that they see online and also word of mouth. Like if they see like a bad rating, they would specifically point it out to sales team, like, I see this, I don't see good reviews out there, like what do I do? Like even now, if I'm able to want to buy a product, I go online, search what are the reviews. On Amazon, I will go and check the reviews of what people have said
And
to
it's
make
a
sure.
verified purchaser too, where it's like an extra level of trust.
Exactly. So I think that really relates what you said, and that is really interesting, because when business got that push, then they say like, yeah, we need to do it, and that makes that makes sense. But again, again, I think they need to see like how is it going to affect the business to be able to say, let's put in more and more resources into this space.
Yeah. Fortunately, um, our team at Manulife was really interesting. We almost operated like a little startup inside the company, and we had a really great director. Oh, I'm pretty sure had at least some startup experience. But he really pushed the fold for the team, like before the business knew that they needed it, so that we were in the position to deliver. So like, kudos to him. He did it and such an amazing job. And funny enough, I was actually hired on as my first, hiring at Manulife, my first role at a university. I was technically hired as a developer because he wasn't allowed to hire designers. As I said, I'm not a developer, absolutely never touched that. But he's like, I need designers. So like, let me hire a couple of them. They're just going to be in the system as developers.
Wow, pretty crazy, pretty interesting. And I think you also need a great leader to be able to take that action as well. Uh,
100%.
he knew he could deliver, and that's why he took that risk and like I'm gonna do it, right?
Yeah, it could have played out badly, but no, it was fantastic. It couldn't have been better.
No, makes total sense. Okay, let's kind of go forward. So you have designed across multiple platforms, and as someone who kind of have worked across Android and iOS both platforms, how do you kind of balance platform specific design patterns with consistency in experience?
Yeah, that one's so tough because there's consistency and experience across your brand, and then there's consistency and experience across each like app ecosystem. So, iOS, for example, is a very basic difference, has a very different share button than Android. Like the iconography is totally different. Um, so when things are like basically like very different between platforms for something like a share button and what that iconography should be, I always skew platform. And then there's things like I would say typography, but I usually skew platform on typography too. But like color, corner radius, um, voice and tone, I think is really important for like for brand. So it's really, I think, a case by case basis. And then I think if it's something that is specific to Android or specific to iOS, you should follow that. And then there's cases where one of them will have a component, like Androids have the floating action button. They don't have that in iOS at all. In those cases, I try to just find a different solution because there's no reason to make a custom button like this that would have all of the Android behaviors, but have it for iOS because like those users aren't familiar with what that component is or what it does. On an Android, you might be. So usually you can find a pretty good like alternative solution for some of those more specific things. Um, but yeah, it is case by case. It's not a one size fits all, unfortunately.
Very interesting. I think I've seen this across a lot of times as well. Like like overall app feels and looks almost similar, but there are different things. For example, I still remember as soon as the notch in an iPhone came out, and there was that animation that came out, everybody was on it. Like, we'll do the live kind of rollout and everything, which makes sense. But again, with Android, yeah, with Android it became very tough. Like, how do you kind of give that delight feature to now the Android people, uh, which feels
Yeah, that
weird.
one I don't think you can duplicate, not without a ton of effort and a ton of custom code.
True,
Um,
true. No, I totally agree. And I think again, again, I don't know the back end of it, but I assume it becomes very tough for the developers as well to figure out how do you want to do it at like a Android system, which again, it's complex on its own. So
but
again, but I feel, go ahead.
thank you. Sorry. I was gonna say, most things are the same or they have equivalents. Like your navigation bars at the top, your tab bars at the bottom. Obviously, maybe don't do a hamburger menu because iOS doesn't have that concept. But like 70, 80% of elements, like modals, everything, sometimes they'll look a little different. Like iOS will have the action sheet, if you got like deleting something, they'll always present it in an action sheet. Android doesn't have that concept, so either you just show like a little alert for the same, or you could have an action sheet and alert, because they're very like one to one interchangeable in that case. So most things have a flavor in each platform, and then you just need to account for that 30%. And obviously, the live activities you're not going to get an Android equivalent for.
No, pretty interesting. And I think that is what, again, the experience kind of differs. Like we have had amazing cases based out of India. Like I've seen, like a lot of people, a lot of companies, what they do, they charge a premium on iPhone devices and they don't charge a
Mm,
premium on Android. And this has been very common. Like any app that you can think of, there have been these cases where same thing was ordered from an iPhone and same thing was ordered from an Android, and there was a big difference between the price.
it makes sense. That's crazy though. But yeah, being in luxury, it's almost exclusively iPhone, because that's what the market expects. So that it is interesting. Android and iOS, like the who you're building and designing for, can be very different people. Can be very
For
similar, but
can be, depends on the product, but I think definitely it is these are, I think, special things. It depends on the company. If you really dig deep, you will find insights specific to the type of device as well, on
mm,
what how the user actually uses it on this type of device. Again, this becomes very niche, and again depends on how much the company is actually going want to be investing in that one particular thing. Again, we may have to find another moment, like that app review thing, to figure out if they want to invest or not. But makes total sense. Okay, let's go forward. Let's go forward to your academic background. So your academic background has been a combination of business, design, media studies. How has that actually shaped the way you think about business and product strategies and user centered design?
yeah, it's such a good question. I feel like the program I did, it was at the University of Waterloo. It was called Global Business and Digital Arts. It jump started, I think, the learning initiative, because working in tech, you can't not be learning. But I think it gave you such a good, excuse me, it gave myself such a good foundation of like looking globally for things. And then one of the really, really big things that program emphasized too was teamwork and communication. And oh my gosh, you can't ever be good enough at those. So, like working in a team, like that all became very, very natural at university. And then that's literally day in, day out, right? Like working in tech, you've got your product owners, you've got business stakeholders, you've got the executive team, you've got developers, you've got your customers and clients. And being a designer, you can't go into a little broom cupboard and do your work. Like you need those moments to actually get it done. I've blocked up my calendar many a days where I'm like, I need to do things. Don't give me any meetings. But the collaboration and the communication, even just presenting, it's such a good skill set to have, and not even good, mandatory, I think, in this day and age. And that was something that that program really, really emphasized. Funny enough, we only had one UX course in that program. I know it's changed a lot, but it's kind of funny that like I had a single course in UX design, but then now this is my whole career. So definitely learned a lot more since then, since first year university.
Very interesting, and I think that makes sense because I've seen a lot of people from around this space background getting into UX. I feel there are a lot of UX is a very amazing field. It has a lot of overlaps with everything that you can think of. And if a person kind of brings in kind of all in one package from all of this stuff, and be good at some of those things and be like a jack of all trades, I think that is an interesting space. Like I have a saying, like I've heard a saying specifically in this UX space, that people who are jack of all trades tend to do really good in UX because they understand the holistic picture of how the product, business aligns, works, and everything else.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what that program was really good at too, that you didn't need to pigeonhole, whatever the term is. You didn't need to just stick to one thing. You got to try lots of things. and then you got to figure out things you like, things you didn't like. Like I found out I kind of like data. I'm not going to be a data scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but doing all the background research into what all these configs are and what they do, that was sort of aligned with the data side of things. And then there's the people who were really good at the coding side of things, so they could do the coding, the design, and they could be fantastic. Even like what's the word? Design engineers, the people doing like design systems, but they're doing the coding and the implementation as well. So that was one of the amazing things about the program I took, and then about the UX field in general. Like you can really figure out what you're good at, even if it's a couple things, and then continue to grow in those fields and become something amazing that no one else could be because they don't have that combination of skills.
Definitely, and I think that is really interesting about this field. And I personally kind of love that I get to kind of explore and work around different fields with different people from different places. And I can understand some, at least in a level that I can have a great conversation with them, but not at
Mhm.
a level that I can replace them for their job. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
that is interesting. Okay,
You
so
can
if
nerd
you
out
know,
with these things too. Sorry, I would say I love microcopy, where I'm
hmm,
like, I can read a whole article about using your versus my in like
fine.
UX design, and I'm like, this is amazing. So yes, sorry, just to share something else.
No, no, I totally agree. And I think there are a lot of smaller things that you can find within the space, which be like, that's so interesting. And you would go too deep into a rabbit hole kind of reading about it. And you'd be like, it is really interesting. And I think that is what I feel like. You can learn a lot uh, with these other businesses. I think you bring different pieces of insights which you feel like are really amazing back to where you actually are actually contributing, and you figure out how I can utilize that and make myself much better and make this product experience much better. That is an interesting phrase. Okay, so kind of let's go forward with another question. So you have worked across teams in banking, insurance, retail, and much more. What's your approach to building alignment with like cross-functional partners like product and engineering?
At both places I've been, like you have to be like this with the other teams. Um, Both Manulife and Tulip, our teams are like our product team is basically three pillars. It's product management, engineering, and design. And you are in everything together. So I think that's a big focus is like what does that team structure look like? I started obviously in Manulife being the designer in a little engineering squad. Um, I was doing stand-ups. I was like doing all of those engineering things. I think if designers aren't regularly attending the engineering and the PM events, ceremonies, especially at the beginning when you don't know people well, and especially in like a remote world where like you're not getting that face-to-face connection, that you're not going to have the relationships where you trust each other, that you all know your subject matter expertise. So I think as a general rule, I feel like it's easier for PMs and designers to go into the engineering space just because there's like Scrum and Agile and all these processes that already exist and just find out how to work within them. That's what I've done personally. Like, I don't know of any engineers who've gone and work with like a very design heavy process. To be honest, my process is very much Scrum, Agile, all those things that the engineers are day in, day out. Um, so yeah, so like being flexible to like mold yourself into other environments and then having that constant communication.
No, I think I totally agree. Again, having that constant communication is a very underrated piece. Like as long as you're communicating them well, like I've seen a lot of times when I'm designing something and I have that conversation with a developer, he may tell me things that this is just not possible. Don't invest too much time in it, and then I have to be like, okay. Then I have to talk to my manager, be like, do we want to do this? He's like, who told you like it's not possible? Like he told me it's not possible. You talk to him now. So I think this sparks a conversation towards different directions. Same with product folks. Like I think a lot of times you get to talk about these stuff uh, with communication. And another thing I would say, a lot of times these are communications outside of work for me as well. Like I've seen where I've worked, we used to go on breaks in the evenings. We used to call them tea breaks. And when we used to
Mhm.
go there, we used to chat about just life and everything else. And in between conversation, if something comes up, we used to talk about it. And this was not something like they may think, but they had a point which they never put up in meetings or in stand-ups or everything. But this is something they had it in their mind. And when they put it across, they're like, this is amazing. I think we should figure out how to do this. I think that, again, I feel communication is a very underrated piece. If you have a really good communication with the team, it is very amazing.
Your point about learning what's possible and not possible of things that you as a designer need but are outside of your realm, I think is so important because that's part of the building the empathy with your team of like you need to know, hey, like this isn't going to be doable. This isn't doable. You don't need to necessarily know all the details why, but then you need to like, if you say, oh, it's not doable as an engineer, I'm going to be like, okay, you need to tell me more than that. Like I need a reason. But usually you get that back and forth and you get those conversations and then, everyone takes something away from that.
Totally agree. And I think with this, you also understand what are the limits of your team, like
Yeah.
which length that they can go to, and what are their strengths. And I think when you are designing experiences, you figure out this is something I know they are good at. I think I should double down if this can make a very good experience. If it cannot, then maybe we figure out something else that may what are the lengths that they can go to. And I think this really helps you understand the limits that the team can push themselves to make a good experience.
Yeah, like if you have a dev who's amazing at animation, like all of a sudden then I'm going to spend more time figuring out what can we animate. And sometimes you've even got them going on their own way and then they come back to you and they show you something and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. If you just tweak, like even like then you could be like, if you tweak this and tweak this just a little bit, um it could be even better. Like I know the easing in and out as like a person who's used Final Cut Pro once or twice, I'm like that makes such a difference though. It looks natural all of a sudden instead of like robotic. But yeah, it's so cool. And then you just all bring your best things forward and you say, hey, well, how about this? And it becomes an amazing product.
And also another thing I feel here is you get challenged a lot. Like if they are good at something and you, let's say you are not the best at animation, you will challenge yourself to figure out. And they can be like a learning, like they can be like a learning partner. Like you push yourself, you learn this, you have a question, come to me. I think that is, again, this is a very underrated, I feel, space people don't talk about, but it has a lot of potential in terms of how this goes back to actually the product and the thing that you're making. So that is really interesting. Okay, so another question that I have, that for the designers looking to grow in like system thinking and breaking into product strategy roles, what skills or habits have helped you that they can kind of adapt and they can learn from?
For product strategy or system thinking. Ooh. Um, on the business side of things, I feel like the way and like I'm not great at this yet, but storytelling is really helpful for like why you're not even why you're doing things, but like even just getting sort of the basic understanding. And then when that story resonates with people, I feel like that's when usually like, okay, like we've got it, we figured it out. Because a lot of the times, like if there's problems, sometimes there can be a whole bunch of little things, but if you can really tell a story around something and how like contrast almost like what is with what could be, like back and forth, um, that's a way to really get almost like the business and the product buy-in. Like, obviously, that has nothing to do with financials and anything like that. That's outside of my realm of expertise. But then that can really shape product strategy. There's a really great TED Talk. I forget who did it.
About storytelling.
Yeah,
I think it's
he's
called the I think it's called the art of storytelling. I don't know the person who said, but I think the title is the art of storytelling.
yeah. There's someone who deconstructed a whole bunch of like very famous speeches, including like Steve Jobs, iPhone keynote, and she found that really great speakers oscillated between what is and what could be. And like that's always stuck with me where I'm like, oh, this is such a cool way to present things. Melissa Mayer comes to mind. I'm like, that's I don't think that's right. But yeah, shoot, I'll have to remember what her name is another
That's
time.
fine.
But
That's fine. We'll figure
yeah,
it out. We'll put it in the description. But I agree that storytelling is something that can create an impact which you don't know now, but it can create a bigger impact because like I feel I have learned this in my life. Even recently I released that career reel to kind of figure out how can I present my career story better, and how do I grab that people's attention, how do I convince them that I have something that they actually need, right?
yeah,
So I wanted to figure out how do I present it. I think storytelling is a very great way. And in this world where attention is like so much, like it's so short, it's the biggest commodity that you can own. And how what's the best way to own the attention for a long time? If you're a great storyteller, even if you think of comics like the stand-up comedians, right? They have an
mhm,
art of that storytelling. They can grab your attention however they do it. They have their own ways of doing it, but they have that thing that they can grab your attention for an hour or two, however long their set is. So I think that is really interesting to see in other places how it is used, and how you can figure out how you want to use it. I think one place I have definitely used it to how to convince stakeholders. How do you tell a story so amazingly that they see like this is going to create like a crazy impact, even if it might just be like going to create this impact, but it should feel like it's going to create this impact so that they actually give you their buy-in, right?
100%. And even for the product teams, because like in the beginning of the stages of the figuring out the product direction and things like that, there's so much ambiguity. It's so hard to have a consensus around things if there isn't a story. So it just kind of brings everyone together and gives everyone like a North Star to head towards. And like, even if, the specs aren't there, we haven't figured all these things out. There's still, all of these open questions that no one has answers to that product people probably focus on regularly. The ambiguity and the dealing with ambiguity really gets easier when you have a solid story.
Fully
Honestly, very
agreed.
different answer though for information architecture. I had to think about this as I was talking. But yeah, the story isn't really there. It's almost like black and white flow dissection. And you could have story in a way, but it's like, okay, what are the contained tasks? I was thinking about like tasks that people do, and like they could have 3 steps, they could have 1 step, but like what are these tasks? And then making sure those are not separate elements, but like I keep going to the word contained, like contained sections. So if I'm designing a flow, I'm gonna have the navigation and it's gonna be like pages. And then from this page, you can do this task. And from this page, you can do this task. It's really, really different, these two things. Because yeah, it's almost like you're building Lego at that point. You're putting it together, but you're figuring out what the pieces are that you need.
Interesting. I'm telling you, it's just the jack of all trades. You need to know a bunch of stuff, and one part of it will be fully different from the other, and you may
Mhm.
want to pick on some different skills there and use them, and the other part would be totally different, and you may want to pick again different things and do that.
100%.
That is amazing. Okay, I just have last question. So for the budding designers that are out there who are trying to get into the industry, who are just starting out, what do you think? What's one piece of advice you would give to them? Thinking in mind, if you were starting out, maybe when you were starting your career, what one piece of advice you would give to yourself?
Do things that interest you, which sounds really generic. Um, but then also figure out how to stand out and do it with something that interests you. So I'll kind of talk about my whole getting my first job experience. Fourth year university, I applied to over 100 roles, as everyone does, but I tracked mine in a spreadsheet, got absolutely nowhere. Um, Finally, I actually like when things started shifting for me, I had built this tiny little hologram. It's not a hologram. And remember, this is like 2016, so it's a very different day and age. But like, I had a friend 3D print a little base, and I got like clear acrylic. and I cut them into, triangles with like a flattened base. And then you can find these YouTube videos where you can basically, like, if you have a prism, you can play the YouTube video, which is just reflected on four different planes. And if you look into the prism at eye level, there's a little hologram in the middle. So going to university, Waterloo's got like a bunch of, the employers will come to university and kind of pitch themselves. Very hard to stand out in that situation because there's 200 other students there and they all want free pizza. But all of a sudden when I came with that little hologram and I was like, "Hey, can I show you something I made?" Conversations flipped really, really quickly. Instead of like, "Can I give you my resume?" It's like, "Please, can we get your resume?" So like build something interesting, something that interests you and that's something you can sort of use to show off. None of those panned out though, like, none of the I got a couple interviews, but, like, none of those actually panned out to get my first job. That was actually, as much as everyone is gonna hate this, especially if you're a new designer, it was through my network. It was through an old co-op who had talked to somebody who was hiring at Manulife. So, don't neglect your network is a big one too.
Interesting. And I think I would say that they did pan out because you at least got an interview. And I would say, yeah, because you had nothing and you got some opportunities. Again, they didn't go forward, that's a different story. But you got from that, this whatever you did, you got something, right?
Yeah.
And another thing I would say in this era, specifically with AI, I can tell you any idea you have, you can find a tool or you can find something out there which can at least make some part of it. You can make your job easier, or it can maybe it can make the whole thing. You don't know, right? But I
Mhm.
think right now building is very easy. You just need to put little extra effort and you can do that. That's why I'm saying, like, I in recent times, like, I've been getting back to kind of storytelling. I loved creating videos. I was a filmmaker back then, and I still love doing that. So I'm figuring out how do I get time to use this skill to show it to potential employers that I love doing this. And again, this is not like I'm not selling I want to do cinematography, but I'm selling that I know my storytelling. I know this, and I am putting myself out there again. Then who knows what kind of clicks on? No one knows. That's the whole point.
I remember seeing your video too, and I was like, "This is amazing." It was so just like the
Thank
little
you.
animations and everything. I was like, "This is such a great video." Yeah, it makes you stand out, and I think it's memorable is a big thing. And when you've got so many other people you're competing against, and unfortunately, that's the scenario for this current moment in the market. Being memorable in a good way is really important.
I fully agree. And I think I kind of relate back to my core things that I've thought and I want to do is, like, as I said, attention is a big commodity. So how do I grab attention so that, and another thing is how do I become unforgettable? That
Yeah.
people remember me, right? People remember that we know a person who did this and he is amazing at what he does. How do I do that? To be honest, I don't think I'm the best designer out there. I don't think anybody would be. It's very difficult to be at the top of the top. I'm definitely really good and I'm a fast learner. I can do a bunch of stuff, but how do I show that? Right? How do I show that I can do that? Again, you need to figure out different things, but I think I totally agree what you said. Network, building stuff, doing something interesting. Definitely these few things I think people should kind of take forward on how towards what they are doing now. Yeah.
Mhm. And I know it's
Well,
really tough for, like, young people to hear, but unfortunately, I feel like that's the stone to the grind era that you have to get through.
agreed, fully agreed. And I think that is how it is today. Again, there's no if or but. This is how it goes. But again, thank you so much. This is we come to the end of the podcast. Really amazing insight, really amazing journey. I think you shared a bunch of actionable tips for the people out there who may be able to use it directly. And I'll definitely link your socials in the description. Again, thanks a lot for your time. And I think it was really wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it was a pleasure to chat, and I really hope this is useful for some people, either, early UX career, mid UX career, whatever your level. I always found other people's stories really helpful. So hopefully this is something that someone else finds helpful. Well, thank you for the opportunity for this.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome.